So there's an old adage that goes, Father Time is undefeated. What am I saying this for? Well, it has been a very popular thing for the last, I'd probably say 5 or 6 years on social media platforms to dunk on us becoming elder statesmen. And then an elder statesman, I'm talking about the category of person that I fall into, which is a millennial. Now, for those who don't know, millennials have been categorized as people who have come to early adulthood around the year 2000, i.e., somewhere around being born in 1981 to 1995. And yes, I do fall into that category. So what that means is millennials, for the most part, the older ones, are turning 40, or some of them are actually in their early 40s at this point. But most of them fall into the category of being in their 30s. Now, to me, when you hit around the age of 30, some people late 20s and some people a little later, you start to become what I say is the final version of yourself. Now, key word there is start. That is where you start to become stuck in your ways. You start becoming a little bit less worried about what's cool and more about just, listen, I'm just trying to be myself at this point. If you're a stubborn person by the age of 30, your stubbornness will probably become amplified to the point that you say, listen, you're either going to take it or leave it the way that I am, and that is what it is. So with that being said, there's been so many different categories that millennials have been put in the last 5 or 6 years. Namely, the big one is millennial cringe.
Time for sneaky snack. It's a snack. It's a snack.
Another one is the millennial pause.
We got some.
Hey, John.
Wow, Julie.
Now, I am not a victim of the millennial pause just because I've had to keep up to date as a content creator, but I totally understand what they're talking about. And what that comes from is a lot of times back in the day when you had to start recording yourself, it took a while for whatever newfangled technology we were using to actually start. So a lot of times we'd be waiting and go, is the camera rolling? And then you'd start talking. Now with all of the editing apps, people usually edit that part out, but us stuck in our ways millennials, we didn't do that. So the millennial pause was born. But if you go on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, or any other type of thing where they provide short compilations, you will see a bunch of things labeled millennial cringe. And we've been getting dunked on for a very long time. Now, why did I start with that long ass intro? Because Gen Z is now getting to the point where the oldest members of Gen Z are reaching their late 20s, and you're about to hit 30. You know what that means for you? That means you are going to start getting called cringe by younger generations, and also the older generations will start telling you things because you're beginning to get stuck in your ways. And with that has become the newest phenomenon in Gen Z culture, which has been labeled the Gen Z stare.
Who's going to tell Gen Z that the stare we're talking about is not the one that everyone under the age of 40 gives a boomer? We're talking about the stare when anyone tries to have just a normal human interaction with you, like in the flesh, and you guys freeze.
Hi, welcome in. How is everyone tonight?
Now, as a person who has begun doing a lot of restaurant reviews, inside I always have to talk to the person that's in front, that is the host, and a lot of them are in their mid-20s. And I have been victim to this Gen Z stare a bunch. I never thought to label it because I don't really care that much, but just like in most modern day social media things, everything gets this broad label. I have been hit with the Gen Z stare a ton. Now, I obviously have none of this on film, but a lot of times when I walk in, they don't say anything to me. And I'm always like, am I doing something wrong? And then I'll ask them, I would like a seating for one, and they just stare at me for like, I don't know, 5 to 10 seconds. And I'm always like, am I at a bad time? Did I catch you? And now I kind of get it to a sense. Some of the comments I saw in this very post is one from, and then they giggle when you walk away like you're the weirdo. I don't know if people are giggling at me when they say it. I just feel like I just want a normal human interaction and I don't seem to get it. Another one here and says, I'm a Gen Z and I think this is too funny. Our generation has been joking about millennials and boomers for years, and now we suddenly can't take a joke. There has been a ton of backlash from Gen Z people saying that we just don't want to talk to you, and that's why we sort of give you this stare. But the counter to that, and which I also agree with, is there's situations where you kind of have to talk to somebody because it's a requirement for your job, or like if someone asks you a question as a requirement for their job, there has to be some sort of reply for this to get resolved, and I think that's where it's coming from. Now look, is this true for every person that's a part of Gen Z? Absolutely not. But one of the things that you will start to realize now, Gen Z, and this is just a friendly warning. One, Father Time is undefeated. You're going to start getting roasted now that you're getting older and your generation starts to have a little bit more of an identity. And two, you just have to take this stuff in stride. And if it doesn't apply to you, who cares? And if it does apply to you, you just have to laugh because it's a part of your generation. Generational identity is just becoming a thing for you, and you're going to start realizing that it's something kind of that you just take as a badge of honor. Are there things that I do are a little bit millennial cringe? Absolutely. That is simply because, like most millennials, I'm a 90s kid. That's when I grew up. I grew up with weird things that people may not have realized were weird back then, but now are considered archaic and a little bit weird. I spent most of the early 2000s wearing clothes that were way too big for a human being to wear. I mean, 4X tees and size 42 jeans when you're actually a size 34 waist is probably not the smartest thing in the world, but it was a style. Now, because I'm the type of person that lives in the analytical sphere where I always try to find reasoning behind what it is, I have tried to come up with reasons because I got this across my desk in the beginning of the day. Why is the Gen Z stare a thing? And the only thing that I could come up with is, unlike the generations before you, millennials, Gen X, boomers, and so on, you grew up with technology at your fingertips. When I was a child, the internet was just beginning to be widespread. It was just beginning to be in every home. So we didn't really utilize it the way that Gen Z did. Most Gen Z people grew up with some semblance of internet, and a lot of you, if you're younger Gen Z, grew up with cell phones as children. I didn't have access, and most millennials, actually all millennials, didn't have access to any of those things. And what has happened, because things like text messaging for your generation were a lot more popular. When I had a cell phone, I think I got my first cell phone in like I want to say like 7th or 8th grade. We couldn't text people back then because text messages were limited. We didn't have access to give it. So you only got like 200 text messages a month. So if you texted somebody, it was literally to say, call me, which is what a lot of people in my age bracket and above do. I get text messages from my parents all the time that say, call me, it's important. And I'm just like, you can't text me for this, but I get it because we're more analog than you are. It's not a bad thing. It's just more oftentimes than not, our childhood and teenage years were spent outside because we didn't have a choice. We didn't have the ability to go and play games online with our friends or have access to be able to text our friends. We spent more time with, I don't say this as like a weird put down, just analytically speaking, we had to spend more time with our friends IRL, which wasn't really a thing back then because everything was done IRL. We had to spend time talking to our friends in person. If I wanted to play PlayStation with my friends, I had to actually go to one of their houses, and all of us met up to go to one of their houses. And I think because of that, your in-person, intrapersonal skills as a whole, not all of you, but as a whole have kind of hit like this wall. I think it hurt your intrapersonal skills. And now, as you're starting to get out and become career-oriented people, if you have to work in person, you just have to deal with the fact that you have to deal with people. It sucks, right? You're just at that age point where you now have a generation or two behind you, technically speaking, because the first year of the new generation, Generation Beta, actually just started. So you have Gen Alpha, which is now has a formative, and some of them are reaching their teen years, and now they're gonna start dunking on you the way that you started dunking on us. It's cyclical, it will happen to all of us. Boomers were once the young, hip, cool generation. Gen X was once the young, hip, cool generation, and believe it or not, us cringe millennials were once the young, hip, cool generation. And right now, you're seeing yourself start to get phased up, where if you have a younger sibling, they might start calling you corny for some of the things that you do. Now, I say all this in jest. It's all in good humor. I know some people in Gen Z are going to get offended by this thing. It's all jokes. Listen, it's a privilege to start to get older, and now you have time to look back and say, well, back in my day, we didn't have access. I see a lot of Gen Z people giving Gen Alpha especially complaints because a lot of their schoolwork is done with ChatGPT. A lot of your schoolwork was done with the internet and cell phones. We did not have access to those things. We did have access to the internet when it came to actually sitting down in front of a desktop. If you went to high school in the 80s, you didn't have access to any of that. But I just think that what your definition of bored because of that is, just like the generations before you, going to get labeled a little bit differently. Growing up as millennials started to become the young adults, 18, 19, into our 20s, we got dunked on all the time by Gen X because they said we didn't have it as good as they had it. For example, having access to cellular phones or digital cameras or CDs or DVDs or anything like that just became something that said, well, we had to rewind the tape when we wanted to play, or, well, we had to, even the older generation used to give us crap because they used to have 8 tracks, and apparently you had to just wait until a track came. I still don't know how 8 tracks work, but I'm just laughing because now you have reached that age, and I've been telling all the young Gen Z people, especially when I was streaming a lot more, that Father Time is coming for you, and one day you are going to be called old and you're going to start being called cringe and all of that kind of stuff. And that day is starting to be here. So as I said before, just be careful who you make fun of, because now it's just your turn at the plate. And as us original Facebook, MySpace, Tumblr era kids start to getting to the point where we're starting to sprout gray hairs, or some of us are losing our hair, or talking about how much fun things used to be when people were at parties without cell phones, we get it. and we're here for you. So if you need anybody to talk on the Millennial hotline, just make sure you drop something in the comments, because I do find this stuff fun. As a person now who just as getting to that age bracket where I'm starting to see younger generations and see the things that they do. I got a younger brother who's in high school, and I see some of the things that he does, and I'm just like, how the hell do you do? Like, what the hell is? We didn't make TikToks in high school. Hell, this is gonna age me, but we used to have cell phones in high school, and no joke, when we got to school, we took our cell phones, right? Took them. We put them in our locker. We never took our cell phones out during school. It wasn't even a thought process to do that. If we wanted to get hold of somebody, even though we had access to text messaging, we were so analog that we would walk past them in school and pass them a note. Even though we did have cell phones and text messaging, we couldn't waste it, and we couldn't talk to our friends on our cell phones before 9 p.m. because we would run out of minutes. And I know some of you always talk about how I say old millennial and I'm old. Yeah, I do, because that's just what we do. As you get older, you're going to start to do it too. You just have enough life behind you that you have a little bit of a nostalgia thing for your childhood. And I think Gen Z is starting to reach that when you talk about how cool your childhood probably were. I hear things about how in the early 2010s, things were so much simpler. And I'm like, I was a damn adult at that time. So as you start reaching your high school reunions and start reminiscing about how things used to be, just remember our older faces in that time. And just remember that we all love you. And now that it's your turn at the plate, it's our turn to kick our old ass feet up and sit back and just be like, yeah, I remember when that was us. So shout out to the Gen Z cringe compilations that are coming. If people want to open up a forum about this stuff, I was actually going to talk about how things were back then as compared to now, because I was thinking about this earlier, just how I was one of the original members of like Netflix back when you had to actually physical copy the DVDs and some of the things we used to do. And I just like doing that stuff. So again, don't take this stuff seriously. It's all kind-hearted fun. You're just reaching the point where, look, some of you dudes, your hairline's starting to go. Y'all might be starting to get gray. And some of the women, it's just, that's what it is, man. That's the part of life. And, now it's your turn. So I love y'all, man. That's all I got for today. I'll see you.